Hello and welcome to Climate Australia. You're with me, Lee Constable, on Cimpatico TV, live streaming to you around the world. But first, rather than talking about the whole world, I want to talk about where I am, where my feet are planted right now. I'd like to acknowledge that I am on Turrbal country and pay my respects to elders past and present. But I'd also like to acknowledge, given that this is an episode and a day all about health and the environment, that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, First Nations people across Australia and across the world have a really unique and ongoing relationship where they don't actually separate people and planet and earth. So I just wanted to acknowledge that at the top of this episode, because we will be talking about something that unfortunately we can't take for granted, which is clean air, our health, the environment. And we're going to be talking today with Dr. Bob Vickers. Dr. Vickers is a GP. He's working in Singleton in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, Australia. He has an advanced diploma in obstetrics and gynecology and provides advanced care in women's health. Dr. Vickers is also an advocate for public health measures, particularly improving air quality in the Hunter Valley. And when we think about that in the context of whether it's bushfires and smoke, or the ongoing context for a lot of communities, which is coal country and what that means for the air, that's definitely very important. So here to talk to us about all of that and why doctors should be advocates for clean air and for the environment, welcome to the show, Dr. Bob Vickers.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining me. I have been having so many conversations with so many people all year about the relationship between climate change and health. But I know you have a personal perspective on that. So could you talk us through your journey to where you are today as a GP with a focus on this?
Yeah, so for me, this is my hometown. I was born here, delivered at local hospital by one of the local GP obstetricians who's only recently retired. And I kind of grew up as a child suffering from asthma in the kind of regional areas just outside of Singleton. There was a couple of times where I had to be hospitalised with my asthma, so it wasn't a kind of mild case just from sport induced or cold weather induced. And where we were, we had a property that was kind of bordering on or getting close to bordering on one of the newly approved open cut coal pits. And so when they generally start with a new open cut pit, what tends to happen is first you get land clearing, clears a lot of the local vegetation off top, which creates a lot of topsoil and overburden. So they'll dump that topsoil and unused waste, essentially material, off to the side. And as part of getting the pit actually created, they do a lot of blasting. And it's the kind of thing where you can hear quite far away. You can often feel it a couple of kilometers away. You'll feel the vibration and hear the noise. And then in the minutes after that, you'll potentially, depending on where you are and where the wind is going, possibly be downstream of a blast plume. So my parents learnt a bit of a pattern that if I was outside playing and they heard a vibration and a blast, and if I didn't come back inside, it would usually be an asthma attack. And so I spent a lot of times during my childhood on a weekend or of an afternoon being called back into the house by mum and dad because they'd heard a blast and I needed to come back inside and stay away from that pollution.
Wow.
And this was like, I'm not young, this was 20 years ago. So that's kind of the time that we've had coal mine expansion in this area. It's gone from 1,700 hectares about over a decade ago to 31,000 hectares of cleared open cut pit in the Singleton and Muswellbrook Hunter area. And with that, we've also seen an increase in our asthma rate in children locally. So it's something that I've grown up with. It's something that I've personally suffered from, and now doing medicine and doing general practice, you see the population effects as well as the individual patients suffering from these effects as well.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing to hear that personal story because that's such a quick time frame, it seems to me, for something invisible to go from there to in your lungs and giving you an asthma attack.
Yeah, and look, where we are now, we've got a property that's fairly well elevated for the region, and so we've got basically 180-degree views to the south where we can see three of the bigger pits in the area. And it's not uncommon for us to see the blast plume kind of go up from one of the big blasts, and then depending on the wind directions, within 3 to 5 minutes, it's traveled 5 or 6 kilometers. And that's kind of towards towns like Bulga, which have long had issues with coal mines kind of encroaching on the town boundary. So yeah, it really is dependent on weather conditions. There've been case reports all across the country, not just in the Hunter, in Queensland and Western Australia, of people being exposed to blast plumes and being hospitalised from really high levels of fine particulate pollution, not just the dust. So it's something that you can see coming. And you can actually even tell from the colour of the dust that's coming what potentially is going to be in it. Yellow and orange, really bad, because that's quite high in nitrogen dioxide.
Wow. And what about after the dust settles? Does other weather events stir up particulate matter that's kind of been around the region that might not have otherwise been breathed in?
Yeah, so most people locally, it's an ongoing complaint, is that the dust that we get outside on kind of outdoor furniture, on clothes, on the washing line, is black. It's kind of this black grey colour, and so rather than it being you would think you go out and you'd have brown dust, you're wiping this black material off all of your stuff outside. And so, yeah, look, that's the coarse particulate that can get picked up by wind. Even a light breezy day is enough to often set off all our air pollution monitors for the coarse particle pollution. And when you've cleared all that land, you've got 31,000 hectares of ground that basically has no vegetation to keep that topsoil down. You've got hundreds of 400-ton trucks driving and generating dust from their wheels. And then every time they have a digger or a loader dumping something from a digger into the back of a truck, that creates a dust plume. When the truck dumps that on the ground, that creates a dust plume. So every small activity on the scale of which it happens combines to create this huge amount of coarse particulate pollution.
And so we've talked about asthma, but what are the other health effects of this particulate matter being in the air?
So the difference in the health effects is generally due to the size of the particulates. And it's something that a lot of people are now coming aware of because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the discussions around droplets versus aerosols. So the larger particles are the ones that a lot of them you can see, and that's what makes up dust. The coarse particulates are the ones that will enter the upper airways. So as well as it entering the lungs and causing asthma exacerbations, it can predispose you to lung infections. It can affect how your immune system responds in your airways. It can cause upper airway irritation, so it can cause itchy eyes, sneezing, hay fever exacerbations, build up of fluid in the middle ear, sore throat. So those coarse particulate, asthma and lung infections is generally the highest risk health with the coarse particulates. The fine and the ultrafine particles are the ones that you really can't see. They're the ones that actually are small enough that they come through the lungs and enter the bloodstream. And they can damage blood vessels throughout the body. Any organ that receives blood supply usually has a risk of being damaged by fine particulate pollution. So that includes kidney disease, neurological disorders. Heart is another one that really can be damaged by fine particulate pollution.
Yeah, I think it's kind of intuitive to most of us who don't have a background in medicine or health that the particulate matter would impact our lungs and airways. But the fact that it also gets into the blood is not something that I think could be intuitive to a lot of people. Are there many people in your community who are getting regular health checks to see whether they're having these lung issues or getting sort of these other health issues as a carry-on?
We have, in terms of the data for the state and the region, they will often break down rates of certain chronic diseases, presentations to hospital for respiratory illnesses, heart disease. Those are all measures that over the last couple of years we've generally performed worse in the Hunter Valley for. So the national rate of asthma, depending on your age, is generally somewhere around 13%, whereas in the Hunter Valley it's up around 18%. So it's something that's often argued because it's low numbers, and that's where it gets really tricky. When you look at a study from somewhere like Beijing or Tokyo, and you have like for the Olympics, they shut down industrial pollution for 9 months, and then they saw a significant change in the birth rate of their babies after that. It's tricky to nail down that data here in terms of individual numbers. So a lot of it is calculated based on, this is our population, this is the expected increased number of deaths based on our population. But even from a day-to-day, we do see increased presentations to the emergency department after days of high particulate pollution, particularly during the bushfires. We saw that definitely.
Yeah, so what is actually happening as far as, regulations, as far as the obligations for mining companies to actually protect the communities around these mines? Like, what's the current state of affairs as far as, legally what has to happen and what is and isn't happening?
Look, the EPA has most of the oversight here. The EPA has been doing a lot of programs to try and reduce the air pollution generated from mining activities. They know it's a problem. They know it's the primary source of our air pollution locally. And so it's about problem solving the individual activities at the mine sites that contribute to that pollution. So there's regular checks from the EPA to ensure that when it's adverse conditions, when it's windy and it's dry, that they don't have every single truck out on an unsealed road kicking up dust from the wheels. There's regulations about how high they're supposed to dump the waste from out of the truck. There's regulations about when they're allowed to blast, what the conditions are like, but it's quite unpredictable to try and predict what the wind's going to do 5 minutes later. That's not something that we can really accurately predict. And even things like watering unsealed roads is a big part of trying to reduce that dust generation. Having said that, when there's 31,000 hectares of open cut mine pits and we're in one of the worst droughts we've ever seen, and we're going to have ongoing issues with water availability, that's not a long-term solution. Ideally, I mean, the best case scenario is to rehabilitate that land, to fill back in those pits. Don't leave the pits at the end of what you've dug out, put it back the way you left it, and regenerate the land. Regenerative agriculture, planting native plants back in that area to try and maintain that soil health so it doesn't all blow away with a light breeze.
So you're talking about, your profession is in health, and you're talking about these really physical, sustainability, nature, plant related things. How much do you think doctors are becoming part of this discussion about the relationship between environmental health and our human physical health? And do you think like this is something that's actually been helpful, having people like you as a voice for the environment?
Yeah, so we've got Doctors for the Environment Australia, growing in numbers. As a medical profession globally, people have definitely for a long time now recognised that human health and the natural world are they're really closely linked. As much as we like to think we are separated from nature, we are a part of nature. Our natural world controls our health probably more than any other factors. We talk about things like encouraging people to quit smoking, but when the background fine particle pollution from our power stations is the equivalent of smoking 3 cigarettes a week, people think, oh, well, hang on, I don't want that. I don't want to smoke 3 cigarettes a week. And so that trying to get that link, I think, in people who aren't yet aware of that issue, we've just got to reframe the language. So rather than saying pollution is bad for health, we've got to say, well, hang on, it can decrease the quality of our food that we eat. It can decrease the quality of the water that we drink. If we don't look after our natural environment, our human health relies on a healthy environment. And we've got to get that right if we want to optimize human health.
So what do you see as some of the main barriers, whether it's public understanding, political will? What are some of the main things that you're seeing and tackling as an advocate in this space?
Look, vested financial interests is a big part of it. Coal has been a huge part of our economy locally. It has been for a very long time a very, very profitable resource here. Just from royalties alone, the state government receives $340 million of royalties from the Hunter Valley's coal every year. And so that's really hard to argue from a economic benefit and from a jobs benefit. And I think for a long time we've been getting the arguments probably reframed or framed incorrectly, and that we say, let's get rid of that economic benefit, let's get rid of those jobs to protect human health. There's there's different parts to the argument. So there's health costs as well as the economic benefits to the coal. So it costs just Singleton alone over $40 million a year in health costs because of decreased work attendances, hospital admissions, chronic disease, quality years of life lost. So there's a measurable health cost associated with that. A lot of these companies pay basically minimal to no tax. They receive quite generous subsidies in terms of diesel fuel tax rebates, but they're major donors to our two most powerful political parties. So from a political side of things, it's very difficult to overcome those barriers, but it's what people want. People can vote for parties that are looking after their health interests and looking after the natural environment. So your vote is probably one of the most powerful things you can do. Writing to your local members, definitely write physical letters, much better than bulk emails and writing on Facebook comments. So these are the kind of things that if enough of our Parliament members hear from the community that this is what we want to have healthy air, we want to have clean water, then I think things will change.
And speaking of the community, oh, sorry.
No, you're right. Look, even from a local level, the people that work in these industries are the people that make the decisions on how much pollution they create. Regardless of what regulation is around, if you're an environmental mine site manager, you've got that power to decide what are we doing today, what operations are we doing today in this weather. If you're planning to mine coal as an upper level management person in a mining company, you can make that responsible decision of, right, we can choose to go underground and reach these coal seams and not create an open cut pit, or we can make a massive pit, clear all the land, and then try and apply to not have to fill it back in as part of our planning. So there's a personal responsibility and a corporate responsibility as well as regulations to try and correct this.
Yeah, for sure. And as far as the local community, I mean, you talk about people's votes, and Singleton isn't a massive place. So I'm guessing it's a bit easier to get a sense of what people are thinking and feeling, and especially in a community where industry and jobs and people that people know or you know, their friends, the people they are in sports teams with are part of these industries. What kind of response are you getting from the community? What's the kind of feeling around the community when you're having these discussions?
I think a lot of people are shocked and they don't realise, particularly in the frame of fine particulate pollution, what you don't see, unless someone tells you, you often are unaware of what's going on. A good example is Bayswater and Liddell. A lot of the stuff that you hear is that we've got brand new power stations, they're world's best standard power stations. Liddell's a bit older, but Bayswater probably was one of the newer ones. Despite that, the European standard for sulfur and nitrogen dioxide emissions from power stations that size, the maximum limit is under 165 micrograms per cubic metre, and they generally all fall under that limit. In August, Bayswater was averaging 500 to 600 for sulfur and nitrogen dioxide. So it's like 6 times the European maximum level.
Wow.
And the EPA actually licenses them to do almost double that. So they're actually allowed to go up to 1,500, like almost 10 times the European standard. And this is invisible pollution. Unless you're going out of your way to go and look at those reports on the AGL or the EPA websites, you're not going to know that level of pollution that's being emitted. But if you're trying to make the decision as a parent as, do I want to live in Singleton or do I want to live on the coast, that kind of information, to me, I think would probably influence that type of decision. It's kind of saying, do I want my kid to be exposed to this level of fine particulate pollution? It's like saying, would I be happy with my kid carpooling with a smoker 5 times a week?
Yeah.
I think most parents would say, no, I don't want my kid sitting in a smoker's car. I'd rather them not
With
smoke
all the
near my
windows
child.
up? No.
Yeah. So once people become more aware, people are passionate for change. People don't want pollution, but people don't want to lose their job if that's what is required to reduce that pollution. And that's not is what required. We don't want to kick everyone out of mining jobs and have everyone unemployed. What we want is a transition to renewable energy. And while we're doing that, good pollution control. And that's something that's not unreasonable to ask for. And I think if the community wants that, then everyone can ask for that.
And it's also something that's becoming more central to the discussion, even in, you know, activist groups that potentially would seem far too extreme left for a lot of the people who are living in regional areas in Australia. A lot more of the discussion happening across the spectrum is, okay, we just need a just transition. We need jobs for these people. We need to say these jobs in coal are not sustainable, even economically, let alone otherwise. But how are we going to keep the community going and thriving and things like that? And it's good to see that kind of discussion happening. Is it making it to Singleton, that sort of discussion? Is that being seen as part of the
Yeah, look, I'm telling as many people as I can about the Beyond Zero Emissions report and their Million Jobs plan, which I think you interviewed
just yesterday.
Also yesterday, yeah, and that's fantastic. And I think the more people that read that, they go, oh wow, actually there is a plan for this. It's something we can actually change from. But even the quality and the type of jobs, if you were saying to someone, look, would you rather kind of work outside in regenerative agriculture or tourism in the area, or would you like to do night shift driving a 400-ton truck for 12 hours
and impacting your health?
Yeah, there's physical health effects of the mining jobs, but a lot of the jobs driving a truck, a sedentary job for 12-hour shifts doing alternating night shift and day shift is actually really awful for your health. Increased rates of obesity and heart disease and diabetes. So we know that night shift is quite bad for risk of dementia and other illnesses. So changing the type of job, not just to protect the community, but to actually move to healthier jobs as well is a big benefit.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're going to roll some credits soon. And basically then after that, we'll go into more of a Q&A where people, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or here in Cimpatico, please put your questions in there for Bob, because he's generously giving up some more time after the interview to chat with us all. Thank you so much, Bob, for being on this episode. And
Very welcome.
yeah, we'll be right back.
Not a problem.